Good afternoon, and thank you for your time this afternoon watching this video, during which I'm going to explain our assessment system and hopefully answer any questions that you might have. So I'm going to start off by thinking about our targets, which you've had information about in the last couple of weeks. So first of all, the long term. So our targets come from actually a system that we use to set GCSE targets that we then roll back into Key Stage 3, and I'll talk that through in just a minute. So for every student, we use a system to generate a target grade for every potential GCSE subject that they might end up sitting in another 5 years' time. And that comes from their Key Stage 2 SATs data and also from their teachers' professional judgment. And we use a national education charity called Fisher Family Trust, who look at thousands and thousands of students who have actually sat their GCSEs. And then they take a subsection of those students who have the same data as your child, and they look at what they actually have achieved in high performing schools. And they use that result to set a target, the most likely grade for that child to potentially get in that particular subject. And that provides us with a target grade for the full range of subjects that we do at Ringwood School. So then we wind that back. Oh, I'll talk about that in a second. So then we need to just go over the difference between 9 to 1 GCSE grades and how they link to the old A to G when you may have sat your own GCSEs a few years ago. So this chart shows the similar grade points between the old system and the new system. And you can see there are a couple of sort of anchoring points between the old system and the new system. One is that a U grade is equivalent to a grade 0. One is that the bottom of an old C grade is equivalent to the bottom of a grade 4, and the government call a grade 4 a standard pass, and that the bottom of an old A grade anchors to the bottom of a new grade 7. So when people talk about grade 7s, that's kind of the equivalent to the old A grade. When people talk about grade 6s, it's the equivalent to the top 2/3 of the old B grade. The 5 sort of straddles the C and the B, and the 4 is sort of equivalent to the old C grade. So people used to talk about getting your magic C. It's your 4 now, but also actually the government really look at students who get 5s and above as well. So the 5 and above, which is called the strong pass, is also a really key threshold. And our Key Stage 3 flight paths are linked in to those specific GCSE target grades that are provided for your child through the education charity and then looked at by all their teachers to check that they think that those grades are potentially realistic grades for them. What we then do is produce, using those grades, a Key Stage 3 target flight path. And you can see our 5 flight paths there. At the lower end of the spectrum, we have the entry flight path, and that would be for students who will end up being targeted a grade 1 for their GCSE when they get to year 10. If a student has a grade 2 or a 3 targeted for their GCSE, they would then be given a flight path target of foundation. If their GCSE target is a grade 4 or 5, they would be given a target flight path of developing, and you can see how that builds up. So for example, there's just an example there for you. If your child has a GCSE target grade in French of a 6, they would be given a target flight path for Key Stage 3, so for year 7, 8 and 9 of secure. And they should be aiming to produce work that is either at that secure standard or possibly above that secure standard in order to, at the beginning of year 10, put themselves sort of on a trajectory to hopefully go on and either achieve or exceed their target GCSE grade. So why do we give your child a target flight path for every subject? So again, like I've just said, if they're on track in terms of they are at or above their flight path, then we know that they will be on track to meet or exceed their GCSE target grade by the time they start year 10. They're not in any way a ceiling on achievement. So if you have a target flight path of developing, that is just your target. That's just where we're thinking you should be aiming for or above. It is not any kind of ceiling on what you could be aiming for. So students can always achieve a flight path that is higher than their target flight path. Even in mastery, if their target is a mastery, they could be awarded a mastery plus by their teacher, just to show that they're right at the top of that flight path. They're, of course, because they're just targets, they're just showing students what to aim for, not a guarantee of achievement. So without a good attitude to learning, which is so fundamental, it's possible that a student won't achieve their target flight path in Key Stage 3. If that were to carry on to GCSE, possible that they wouldn't achieve their target GCSE grade. Like I've said before, it is just the grade that they should be aiming to be near or possibly above. And they are the standard that your child's past performance at the end of primary school indicates that they should be achieving in later years if they continue to work consistently and demonstrate a good attitude. And you may feel that the end of primary school was already a very long time ago and my child has changed, but actually the data that we use looks at those very 2 points, the end of primary school and the end of year 11. And so it is very robust. It tracks thousands upon thousands of students every year to see what people who have that typical starting point at secondary school, the end of primary school data, go on to achieve at the end of Key Stage 4. They can also be a really useful indicator. So if your child's target is a secure, but actually they're just achieving foundation, that's perhaps a real indication that your child is for some reason struggling. There's some sort of barrier to their learning or understanding in that subject. And fundamentally, I've split up there, what does target not mean? But the first thing I'm going to say is, what does it mean? It is just a guide. It's something that helps us as teachers, helps you as parents and carers, and helps your children to monitor the standard which they're working against a target. So it just gives us a bit of a sort of benchmark of whether what they're actually getting is in line with our expectations, or whether they should perhaps be getting above that, or whether or not they're getting below that for a particular reason. But what does it not mean? It does not determine the class your child will be in. Their target flight path does not determine that class for those subjects who set or stream. The only thing that determines that is their prior data and their current performance. And sets and streams are always fluid, and children can always be moved between them till we find the right place. It doesn't ever limit the grade that they can achieve now. So when we get to GCSE, they could be given a target grade of a 3. Of course, they could absolutely smash that and get a target grade of a 7 or an 8 or a 9. That's the case with any grade, any target at all. There's absolutely no limit on what people can achieve. But however, the flip side is true. So it doesn't guarantee that your child will achieve a specific grade or a specific flight path. Again, it's just a guideline to measure their actual achievement against. So it does not mean the target they are actually achieving. You will see that on your second progress check that will come out later this year. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And that will be called the working at flight path. So that is the reflection of where they really are working. The target flight path is the guide to where they should be working or should be exceeding. So how does this work over the course of Key Stage 3? So actually, our flight paths are what we call flat. So in other words, they don't change across the year groups. Year 7 has 5 flight paths with those 5 names I showed you. Year 8 has the same 5, and Year 9 has the same 5. And students don't get incrementally harder targets from one year to the rest. That's because the standard that underpins that flight path does get incrementally harder. So the standard a student needs to achieve a secure flight path in Year 7 is not as difficult as the standard a student in Year 8 needs to achieve to still get the secure flight path, which in turn is not as difficult as the standard that sits underneath the secure flight path in Year 9. So just because the word remains the same, the standard that the child has to actually achieve to get in that flight path gets more and more challenging across the 3 years. And the descriptors for every subject's 5 flight paths can be found on our website. So you can have a look and see what makes mastery in French in Year 7, or what makes entry in English in Year 8, etc., etc. So now that you have the target flight paths for your child, please can you encourage your child to know what their target flight path is and to start talking to their teachers about how they can work to achieve it, how they can work to surpass it, to get beyond it. What's the knowledge, what's the understanding that they need for a particular flight path? And remind them that the best way to find that information is either talking to their teacher or, of course, looking at their assessment feedback, which may well have targets on there for them to work towards. So what will come home to you as parents? So actually, just later on this week, you will get your first progress check, and that will consist of information about attitude. So you'll have their attitude to class and their attitude to home learning for every subject, and what we call a course start statement, which indicates how well your child has begun in each of the subjects they study. So those are the potential outcomes that you will see on your child's progress check on the screen there, the 5 potential different course start statements that their teacher will have decided which one is the most appropriate. And they sort of encompass a really wide range of attitudinal attributes. And I've put some of them up there for you. So their attitude to learning, their behaviour for learning in the classroom, their organisation, how well they complete homework, the effort they kind of make, the engagement in lessons, whether they've been catching up on anything that they've missed, all of those sorts of things feed into the teacher's judgment on how well they've started in their subject since September. And you'll also get your child's attendance so far. And so the progress check will look a little bit like this. So you can see the subject, you can see the teacher, you can see their attitudes, you can see whether or not they've got a scholar award, and then you can see the subject start statement as well. And then when we go a bit later on in the year, you'll get a slightly different progress check that will look a bit like this. And I'll show you the sort of summary of what it is in a minute. You can see you still get attendance, you still obviously get the subject, the teacher, the attitude, the scholar awards. But in the second progress check later on this year, you will get the target flight path, which is flagged there as the flight path to aim for, and you will get the working at flight path. So you'll be able to see whether your child is reaching or exceeding their flight paths. And if they're a little bit under, start talking to them about what is it that's preventing them from just making quite the progress that we might hope they'll make, so that we can unblock those blockers, take those barriers away with them. So that's a summary of what the second progress check will consist of: information about attitude, a reminder of your child's target flight path, the flight path at which your child is currently achieving, and therefore that provides you with the information about whether your child is sort of about, above, at, or below. You can work that out by comparing those two columns. So a question that you might well have in your head now is, well, why don't we ask teachers to decide on the flight path your children are working at for the first progress check? We've obviously got the targets. We're going to give you that judgment further on down in year 7. But because your child is new to us as a school this year, no teachers have obviously ever taught them prior to the ones that have them in September. We really want to spend time getting to know their strengths, their areas for development across a range of different assessments. And not giving that judgment just yet, waiting another couple of months, just means we've got a chance to assess them in different ways and on different skills and knowledge, and therefore build a more accurate, more robust picture of the flight path that overall your child is working at. A reminder that another opportunity to ask questions, to find out how your child is progressing, is coming along thick and fast. So our Year 7 consultation evening is on Thursday, the 18th of March, and you will get a letter on the 3rd of March giving you details about how to make appointments with teachers. Who is it that you really want to speak to? So more information to come about that. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention to this video. Any questions about flight path or assessment, please either email Mr. Massimino or email myself, which is rheverweb@ringwood.hants.sch.uk. If you do have a specific question about the attainment of your child, how they're actually doing in a subject or a concern, please, in the first instance, either email your child's teacher directly, which is in the format of initial surname. So if your child's teacher was called Bob Jones, you'd be emailing B Jones at Ringwood, etc. Or if you're not sure of their email or indeed their first name, please do email the office and they will direct your email to the right place. So thank you very much for your attention this afternoon. I hope that's been a useful video, and we look forward to seeing you virtually on consultation evening.